Welcome to the Stepmom Side with Alicia Crasco, the podcast for stepmoms ready to create the life they want and one they actually have a say in. Here we talk all things stepmom life and just a little bit more. Leave the superficial conversations at the door and get ready for perspective shifts and actionable advice to help you on your way to creating the life you want, one step at a time. Hi, Christina. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
Oh my gosh, I'm excited to talk to you just because it's going to be a lighthearted conversation about being a stepmom. And so many times I have people on that, or I do a lot of solo episodes about like specific things like, here's how you work through this, or here's how you do that. Or I bring somebody in to have them guest speak on relationships or money or whatever. So to have another stepmom on and just like talk humor stuff and like how you use humor to like get through the stepmom bullshit is like, I'm here for it. I'm ready.
Yeah. Good. I'm excited. Yeah. It was interesting the way that we met because I think I was pitching myself as like, hey, I'm a comedian and I would love to guest on people's shows. And you were like, you know what? We could use something lighter around my show.
I'm like, she's going to think I'm a crazy person, but hey, would you be interested in talking stepmom stuff? Okay. So you have 3 stepkids and you have one kid of your own. Can you talk to us a little bit about what is it like for you to be a stepmom?
Yes. So the circumstances around our family dynamic are a little bit different because my husband's children live out of state right now. And so everything feels very big when they come. It feels very like our standard house has a 12-year-old and a 20-year-old who are very like keep to themselves and they're cool and they interact, but there's not a lot of energy throughout the day. And my husband and I are both like very lone wolf individual sort of people. And so when the girls come in, it's just a completely different dynamic. It's a change in energy. And so I find myself trying to match that energy, even though it's not necessarily in my personality to be that sort of like woo woo and like, let's go big and let's go do a bunch of things and let's whatever. And so I'm finding myself trying to ebb and flow out of the family changes when they're here. And so I have done that to an extent where I'm like over planning things. I'm trying to overcommit us. I want us to do a bunch of activities to stay busy. And I feel like I'm finally getting to a point where I'm like, it's okay if we're just comfortable in each other's spaces at this point. So it's a lot harder to acclimate to the stepmom role because we're not around each other full time. And so because it sort of ebbs and flows in and out, I find myself changing my behaviors to accommodate. And then, you know, when the schedule goes different, then I find myself falling back into old habits.
Mm-hmm. So just to clarify for the listener, if you're like, wait, what? She has 3 kids, but she said girls. The 20-year-old lives with you. The 20-year-old is your stepkid and lives with you. And then you have a 13 and a 15-year-old that go back and forth.
Yes.
And then your son is 12.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the 20-year-old just moved in with us in December. So I still sort of, in my brain, I imagined 3 kids coming and 3 kids going, but that has lessened a little bit. So now it's just the 2 go back and forth.
Okay. Can you touch on like how, is it harder? Is it weirder? Is it easier to have like different dynamics like with the custody schedule? Or is it just, it is what it is with you?
Yeah, it's a combination of, it's not hard, I don't think, for us. I feel like it's just different. So we enjoy the new energy and we enjoy the new dynamic. It gives us a lot to think about in terms of how people interact with one another. And I think a lot of, like I said, like in my brain, I still envision 3 kids coming and going. And so it used to be up until recently, just my son who got very much only child syndrome, who would just sort of like handle all his business. And then we would have an entire household of people show up. And so the dynamics completely changed every time they came. And so now it feels as if things are softening up a little bit, but it's definitely a challenge to evaluate the dynamics every time because I feel like at every new visit, the kids interact with each other differently. And so evaluating like, oh, okay, well, They definitely triangulate. So you have to keep two of them together at any one time. And so if three of them are together, somebody's going to be left out, somebody's going to be fighting.
Mhm.
But if I can sort of take inventory of how they're interacting when they first show up, it makes it a lot easier to navigate the dynamics, and sort of like you can see when things are not going to do well and separating people. And it just feels like chaos. Like it just goes from like calm to chaos. And so it's cool because we like the energy, but it's definitely, we're working a lot harder with our brains to try
Mhm.
to manage situations all the time.
It's the mental gymnastics of like staying ahead of it, right? Like you said, you're
Mm-hmm.
trying to like read the room, like what energy are you guys coming with? Okay, who's pairing off? Like who's being left out? Who's
Mm-hmm.
acting weird? Who's doing what? And you're like, I just want to sit here and like stare at a wall. Like,
Yeah. Well, and
the
so
change
what
is
we
welcome, but like, damn.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a lot. It's just a change that I think my nervous system has to sort of acclimate to, because also there's noise associated that I'm just not used to noise. And so I'm like, oh, okay, I just like my systems have to reacclimate to the new energy. And so um I, via trauma response or whatever you call it, am always trying to read people's moods and sort of evaluate situations. Yeah. And so I wish I could let that go and just sort of let them work out whatever their dynamics are. But also, because I only have one kid, the fighting sibling thing is a challenge for me. And I don't know how that's being managed at their other house, in terms of like, are they allowed to fight it out? Are they supposed to be separated? And so we just sort of like vibe with like, all right, are things getting rude? Are they getting mean? Are they getting really disrespectful? Like, is there a point to this bickering that's happening back and forth? And if not, can we just, for everybody's sake, separate things? And so much of it is just a guessing game of like, well, I hope this was the right way to handle it, because we'll find out later, I guess.
Wait, you don't know everything? You're a stepmom. Like you don't know
No,
how to
I
like handle this
super
perfectly.
do.
Okay, something that I thought about when you were talking about like the kids coming back and forth. When you is your 12-year-old with your husband, or is it from a previous relationship?
No, it's from a previous relationship. We don't
Okay.
have any kids together.
Okay. So was it hard for you to like blend together that way? And do you see like a dynamic shift with your son with the coming and going of your stepkids?
He loves it when they're here. He
Okay.
loves it. He counts the days. He's ecstatic to go to the airport to pick him up. He
Yeah.
loves it. And so my son's 12, and then my husband's youngest is 13. And they fall into hanging out with each other. They literally, it's actually really cute, because normally I have a thing about my kid like sitting on the couch all day. It stresses me out and causes me angst.
Mm.
But the two of them will sit on the couch all day, and they will talk to each other about whatever podcast they're listening to, and they'll play video games, and they'll like be scrolling their phones but next to each other. And I'm like, oh, something about this feels okay.
Yeah, right. Because you're
Like
not
there's some
alone.
social element to it. Yeah. And so he loves it. And I feel bad every time they leave, because he cries. Like it really upsets him. So he really likes having the same thing, like the energy, and they just bring a different level of excitement to the house that we don't normally have. And then he goes to his dad's house, which has like, he also has a stepmom over there. He's got a half brother, no, three half brothers, but one of them's 16, and then the other two are babies, like two
Okay.
under 5, I think. And
Okay.
so it's just he goes over to that house, and the dynamic is like he becomes a caretaker.
Mhm.
And he's always been very into babies, and like, let me hold them and let me feed them and let me take care of them.
That's sweet.
And so I think he just really enjoys where he's like, oh, siblings, but they are my age. They can do stuff. I can talk to them about things. They understand. He's really into makeup right now. Like he just has a lot more in common with them, and he gets really excited when they come.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
Does he ever ask like for a sibling of his own? Like, does he has he
I
ever said
don't
to you, like, hey
I
mom,
don't think so.
yeah.
No, he I think he thrives on the only child thing, because he's technically not an only child because he
Yeah.
goes to another house, but I think he lives for like the sole attention.
Oh my gosh, yeah. My daughter is 5 and same thing. Like my stepkids are 20 and 23. And so she's basically an only child, right? Like my stepdaughter was in the house for like 2 months and then she graduated and was off to college. And then my stepson moved in full time like the year that she was born. And so he was here for 3 years. And that was really hard. Like when he left and like his car was still here, but like he wasn't
Oh.
here and like
Mm-hmm.
him and his friends would like play with her. They were like obsessed, like
Oh.
super great. And then she'd be like, well, where is he? Like, when is he coming back? Like, I'm gonna try not to cry telling you this, but because
Yeah.
we were like are still, but like super close. And so when he left, it was just her and I. And then she was like, well, where is he? Like when is he coming back? And I'm like, at that point we were, because he went to the military, we were only talking to him like 1 day a week for
Oh.
maybe 5 minutes. So I went from like seeing him all the time, having him all of the time to like chopping off my right arm, right? And so then
Yeah.
to have her like, well, where is he? And I'm like, how do you explain this to a 3-year-old that like he's not here and he's
Mm-hmm.
not coming back? And then like he was, stationed overseas. And so now she like, I don't think that she remembers any of it. And I'm kind of grateful for that, where she's not like 7 or 8 where she's like older and like gets it. Because I have stepmoms that I coach that are like, my stepkids leave and like my kid really struggles. And I'm like, oh, that would be really hard. Like when he would leave, like on the weekends, he would go and see his friends. And she just was like, oh, he's going to see his friends, whatever. But he was here full time. So he was always here. But then like now that she's an only child, she's like your kid, like, I like having my friends here, but like I love when they leave too. Like I love when it's
Mm-hmm.
just us. Like we had a massive birthday party for her when she was like this year when she turned 5, and she like invited her whole class. Like she'd be like, Mom, get their phone number. And like, how do you tell some other mom like, I don't want your phone number? She's gonna try to invite you to her
Right.
birthday party, right? So we had like 17 kids come with like a parent, if not two parents, and there were just like kids and people everywhere. She had a
Yeah.
meltdown. She was like, there's people everywhere. And I'm like, well, you kind of invited them. So
Uh-huh.
and then she was like, next year, maybe we could just do like 5 friends. Because that was way too many people. And I'm like, I tried telling you.
Right. Yeah, my kid is exactly the same. He's a party animal. He's like, "Oh, I want to have people over. I wanted to play games. I want to what can we call my friends or whatever." And then an hour in, you'll go check on them and they're all like in their respective spaces just ignoring each other because they're already peopled out. And I'm like, "I know." Because and
Same,
at least
right?
they know their limits,
Yeah.
which I'm grateful for that they don't bicker and they don't fight. They just are like, "Okay, I'm going to go to my corner and enjoy my personal space." But it's that is one of this will sound terrible and feel free to edit it out. I have this philosophy that gets me through that's just as kids are dumb. Like kids are dumb and they should be because their brains are not fully developed and they don't make good decisions. And so you want to reason with them and be like, listen, just listen to the words that are coming out of my mouth that will make your life so much easier, but they're dumb and they can't process it and they don't know what's right and what's wrong. And so they're just like, no, I want to do the thing I want to do. And you're like, okay, cool. And then when it doesn't go right, then you're like, okay, so we'll keep that in mind for next time that like this was the outcome of this situation. And
Yeah.
that's so much of what I do with my kid is like the natural consequences of things, which is like as a control freak, it's really
Can't
painful
relate.
for me to just let it happen.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, so I would encourage you to XYZ. And these are the things that I would think about. And then go ahead and make your decision. And he's like, okay. And then when it doesn't work out, he's like, oh, I'm like, I know. Okay. So now we know for next time.
Oh my
But
gosh, I know
yeah.
exactly what you're talking about. Yeah, there's so many. I mean, she's like I said, she's 5, but same thing. Like I'll do the exact same thing. Like, hey, I know that you want to do this, or I know that you want to do that, but here are some things that we need to think about
Mhm.
with X, Y, and Z. And then she'll be like, no, no, no. And so it's now gotten to the point because I've had these conversations, and then we go back and like we back brief things like, hey, how did
Mhm.
it go? Like, did it not go well? Why did it not go well? Did it go well? Why did it go well? And so many times things have said, hey, or she has said like, hey, I didn't like how that went. And in my head, I'm like, I told you so. But I'm like, okay, but I'm not
Yep.
gonna say that, right? Like I want you to
Mhm.
like critically think through this. And I'm like, okay, well, what did we talk about before? And then sometimes she'll be like, oh yeah, you did say that this, that, or the other was gonna happen. And I'm like, you are
Uh-huh.
listening.
Yeah. It's tough because then you're like, well, you are listening, but then you're just like, boop, throw it away
Yeah.
whenever you don't feel like
You're
it. And
like,
I'm like, okay.
you're just listening to me. Okay, so do you find that how you parent your kid is different than your stepkids? Yes or no? Why or why not?
Yes, 100%. I have taken the route of, and this will probably sound terrible to all the stepmoms out there. I don't parent my stepkids. I don't think that that's my role.
Okay.
I provide guidance to my husband. I provide support to my husband. I feel like it is my role in this situation to give him as much support as possible, to have the best relationship with his kids that he can, and to raise the best kids that he can. So I definitely observe things that happen. I give him some coaching. I make recommendations. We talk about everything. We sort of like run through how he should have conversations, what he should say, how frequently. Like, I feel like I'm more of his parenting coach.
Hmm.
And he does the same thing for me with my son, but I don't want to parent his children. I don't think that's my role. I'm definitely, obviously, if it's just us around, I'm not going to be like, yeah, do whatever you want. Like, I am still going to be the same parent that I am, but I don't want the primary parenting role. I don't want to be the bad cop. I don't want to deliver the hard messages. I want to be the support system that's available for questions, that is helping them have the best time with their dad, or when they come to this house that they feel very comfortable and supported and have a great time. But I just, and he's the same with my kid. He does not parent my kid. We are very clear about respect and boundaries, and we will never let any of our kids be either disrespectful or in any sort of way, like insubordinate to either of the parents. But I don't want to parent his kids. What I offer, I would say, is more of like a supportive aunt role.
Hmm.
I don't want to tell them what's right or wrong, but if they're coming to the conclusion of what's right or wrong, I love to have conversations with them about it and help them build on it. But I don't want to tell them what's right or wrong, because that's sort of between their parental units to figure out how best that they think they're going to give them guidance on those things.
I like that you say that you will talk to them about it and like build on that, because sometimes I think that those are like the best conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would have like crazy in-depth conversations with my stepson about it because he was here full time. And I mean, we would dissect like whatever happened. Like, okay, well, like what? And he like, I can't believe this happened. I'm like, well, how do we get here? What
Mm-hmm.
happened? Like, walk me through what happened. Because I'm like, if I can get you to like process through like what happened, maybe at some point you might process through on your own and think like,
Right.
oh, maybe I shouldn't do that again.
Right. Hopefully the processing gets faster so you do it before next time. But if not, at
Oh,
least you're
really?
like, I would love for those neurons to build up a little bit. But
Oh my gosh, yeah.
yeah.
Um, how is your relationship with your stepkids? Is it always the same? I think this is something that stepmoms get caught up on. Like, okay, I've got two stepkids, I've got three stepkids, I've got four stepkids. Like the relationship needs to look exactly the same. My relationship with my stepkids is not the same,
Mm-hmm.
but it doesn't do me any good to sit here in a coaching call with somebody and be like, you don't have to have the same relationship with each of your stepkids, because there's still that voice that's like, okay, will you possibly like this one more or that one more? And like we need to like up our game here or there or back off or do this, and it's just like a constant battle. What would you say yours is like?
So I think it's very different for each kid, just like with every other relationship you're going to have. There's going to be different personalities that either mesh or clash. As I said before we started this call, my mindset about my relationship with my stepkids is that this is not their choice. They don't have a choice as to whether or not I'm in their life, and they don't have a choice for the most part in terms of where they spend their time, like based on the custody arrangement, they're going to spend this time here and that time there. And we talk through that with them. And if there's ever an instance where they're like, oh, I don't want to go, or I would prefer to spend time here or there, we're flexible with that. But I don't expect them to like me. I don't expect us to have even a close relationship, because they didn't pick me, and I'm okay with that. And I don't fault them for whatever relationship we do or don't have. And I
Mhm.
am going to give the same amount of energy to each of them in different ways, depending on what they're receptive to.
Mhm.
And it's cool if we end up not being close right now, that's okay. I'm not going to, as an adult woman, force my friendship onto teenagers and be like, no, but you have to like me.
You
And
like
I
me,
have,
right?
yeah, and I have met stepmoms that are very concerned with like, well, I need them to like me, and therefore I'm gonna do whatever they want, buy them whatever they want, and go wherever they. I don't. I want whatever opinions they have of me, I want it to be based on just how I am. I don't want it to be on what I can do for them, because that
Right.
shouldn't be a parenting dynamic in any world. So, um, I am sort of hoping, and I know everybody says this, but like I'm hoping as they grow up and as they understand the importance of certain things and certain dynamics and uh how people can impact your relationship, I'm just hoping that they realize that I can be valuable in their lives. And I don't think they realize it right now because I'm not their mom, I'm not their dad. I don't come to them with any sort of like dramatic discipline, but I am in our household. If anybody's going to sound stern, it's going to be me. It's not going to be their dad. And usually it's because I'm talking to my own kid. And that's the way that I deliver messages to him. But I'm just sort of hoping that we're playing the long game here, and that for anything that feels like it's missing right now, because they're teenagers and there's only so much you can connect with a teenager, just outright, even if you are their parent, but let alone if you're sort of like one layer removed. I'm hoping that over time they'll sort of see the value that I bring to their lives, or that I have brought to their lives, or the impact that I've had on their dad's relationship with them, because I try to do all of that stuff sort of behind the scenes and just let it ride. And so I'm hoping when they have enough perspective, they'll be like, oh, she actually contributed a lot to like my childhood and my life that we just didn't know at the time.
How long have you and your husband been together?
7 years, going on 8 years.
You don't sound very confident.
I'm doing the math. Got together in 2016.
You have an English degree, so okay, yeah.
Yes.
Math is not a strong suit. But I think that so coming in when you've got like a 13-year-old, I'm not even going to try to do math to you, 15 and like a 13-year-old, but like
Mhm.
-7. It's those years are hard. And I will definitely agree with you, like having older stepkids and like been through the teen years. It is hard and it's a total mind fuck of like, hey, um, this like we were okay. And then now all of a sudden this kid is like moody to me or like doesn't
Uh-huh.
talk to me or now they're off to me or they're weird to me. Like, what's going on? Like, I'm going to try harder. And I'm like, please don't.
Hmm.
Don't try harder. Like you said, like, you don't need to like win their love or like all of the things that you can do for them. There's a lot of things that you can do for them, right? Like, you're the adult, you have a job, you have access to the resources, you can do all of these things, but you don't want your
Yeah.
relationship based on that. But also, like, a lot of the stepmoms that I coach, like, didn't bring kids into a relationship. And so it's developmentally normal, it's expected when they become teens, they naturally start to pull away. They naturally start to go and hang out with their friends more. Now they can drive. Now they've got cars. Now they can go wherever they want. Now they've got a job. Now they've got sports. Now they, whatever it is, they've got 1.5 million things to do. You're the last person that is on their mind. Like they're
Right.
not thinking about their parents. And you are essentially one step lower than that, right? And so they're
Exactly.
definitely not, and like
Yep.
no one wants to hear that, right? Like I'm not thinking about my parents, but I'm definitely not thinking about you. Like you're my stepmom, you're my stepdad, you're whatever.
Right.
Like I don't care about you. And it's not that I don't care about you, it's just that I'm so absorbed in my own life as a teenager. That's all I can think about is like when is the next dance? Where are we going to go and get lunch on Saturday? Or, what's practice going to be like tonight? And a lot of times, yes, there may be loyalty binds or there may be some sort of God knows what going on with the other house, but a lot of times they're wrapped up in their own world or they're having an off day because something happened with their friends or maybe practice didn't go well or maybe their work hours suck and they're going to miss something or they had a test that didn't go right. There's so many things that are factoring into how they're treating you. And 99% of the time has nothing to do with you.
Mhm.
They're just naturally pulling away. But a lot of stepmoms get caught up in I need to try harder. And I'm like, for the love of God, please hear me. Do
Mhm.
not try harder. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's
And I think
normal.
the nice thing is because my 12-year-old is going through a similar sort of like teenager thing,
It's hard.
I generically don't take things personally. And again, I think that's sort of a trauma response that I have sort of insulated myself against the way that people feel about me. I don't care. And for better or worse,
That's a
I feel
great
like
thing to
that's
have as a
not my
stepmom.
problem. Yeah. Yeah. So if you like me, great. If you don't, great. I'm going to provide the same lifestyle and support that I can, regardless of the circumstances. All I care about is that you're respectful toward me, you're respectful toward our environment and to the people around you. And outside of that, I'm sort of chalking everything up to like, well, this situation sucks for them too.
Hmm.
Like, they're not, they wouldn't choose this if they had a choice. So of course they're going to have feelings about it. And they, like with my stepkids, for example, they all have their own rooms, and they, whenever they come here, they have their own space that they can go to. But there was a period of time when they were with my husband that they didn't, and they would come and they would sort of like be put into an environment where they were sort of like lumped all together, and tensions were really high. And it just was uh I just am very sympathetic to the fact that like they're not choosing this and they're not choosing me, and I'm okay with that. I don't take it personally. I don't take anything that they say personally. Even if I feel like it's directed at me, I just have this like, well, you don't know me.
Hmm.
You know me to the extent that I'm willing to allow you to, but you don't know me as a person, outside of what we experience as like a step parent and a stepchild. And so I don't take offense if somebody doesn't like me, because I'm like, oh, well, if you knew me, I would feel more confident in your opinion about me. But since you don't, I'm okay to trust that you're going off of whatever limited information you have. And that's okay with me, because I'm not going to take that personally. And like I said, I'm just sort of, I have seen my husband's relationship with them change over time in his comfort level with communicating, with getting more emotionally intelligent, with understanding his own emotions and how to process it, with putting in perspective that him not living near them does not make him a bad father, which I think is a thing that he went through. And so watching their relationship grow and develop, and watching him grow and develop, I'm like, oh, that's where my work is. I'm doing that. And I'm going to give him the credit for doing the work, but he's doing it at my assistance and at my like impetus. And so I look at all of the things that I've added, and I'm like me or not, I've made your life better. So someday you'll realize it, and it might not be now for whatever the circumstances are, but I'm confident in what I'm bringing to our relationship, that I'm making it better.
Hmm. So what about when it's not going well and you guys are there and it's really hard to just like sit in the uncomfortable part of it? Like, how do you navigate that? Or how do you use humor to get through that? Because I know that you're like humorous and like funny.
Yeah. I find that I gamify everything. It's the same thing that I do with my podcast. It's like a game show. And even with my podcast, I'm turning it into, I'm like, oh, I want to make it like a variety game show where, because right now it's just trivia. I want to like expand on it and make other things. We do that in our house too. We are very, um, every night we are trying to do some sort of something. So whether that's, they're playing video games, or whether we're doing board games, or we're doing Jackbox, we play Heads Up. Like we
Oh,
try
yeah,
to
yeah.
gamify. We gamify our birthdays, and we'll do scavenger hunts for any presents that we have. For Easter, we'll do like, in all of the Easter eggs, there will be like a puzzle piece, and then you have to put the puzzle together in order to get where your Easter basket is. Like, we really
That
try
is so
to
cool.
add lightness to everything. And so when we're finding that things are a little too much, like my husband right now just took all the kids to go bowling, because he's like, oh, I just want to like feel like we're interacting and we're doing something where they're not staring at their phones. And so we have a pretty good beat on like, hey, we need to leave it alone right now and just let people like do their own thing. And then, okay, they've had enough time to do their own thing. Now it's time to force them to interact, because they're also like, all of them are in that, like, they would stay in their room and scroll their phones 100% of the time if we would let them. And so we
Mhm.
can't let them.
Yeah. Did you ever find yourself feeling like, okay, I need to overplan everything to like make sure that like we're blending and like everyone's getting along. And if everyone's doing something, then like we're gonna be okay. But I can't like, what if what if it's uncomfortable? So, we'll just keep making ourselves busy.
Yes. Yes. And I think a lot of that comes from, um, it comes from my inability to let people just sit. I am always like, well, let's play a game and let's do a thing and let's whatever. And so in the beginning, it was like, okay, so every week we need to make sure that we plan a thing. Every night we have a thing going. Okay, so 3 nights a week we need to find neighborhood activities that we can. And I was like, well, if we have something to go to, it takes the effort off of us trying to force some sort of interaction or camaraderie or whatever. And then it'll just happen organically that we'll be in the same space. And I think people just get more comfortable and more casual when there's not a lot of pressure put on things. And so we overdid it. Like my husband's in the military, and the couple weeks before he deployed, we did like Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm,
Oh, yeah.
Universal Studio. We crammed it all in. Yeah, let's also go to Legoland, and then let's go to medieval time. It was ridiculous, but I felt like, oh well, we have to make the most of this time. Also because I feel like there's limited time, and so I'm like, well, they're only here for a certain amount of time, so we got to make sure that every day we're here, we're doing a thing. And it's funny because the 15-year-old at some point was like, you guys do a lot of stuff. And she didn't say it in a mean way. She was just like, hey, can we simmer down on the stuff that we do?
It's so stupid.
And I was like, yeah, you're right. We do a lot of stuff. And so
Don't you like it?
yeah, well, and I love it.
Yeah.
I'm from San Diego. Theme parks are everything that I love to do. And my kid, unfortunately, is a carbon copy of me. And so he's like, yeah, let's go to theme parks. Let's go do things. But I think the environment they're used to is there's not so much forced interaction. And so they're like, I'm tired. Like I already don't interact with you regularly, but like I would just like a break from you. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. That's totally realistic. I totally understand. But I love forcing us out. My husband does not love forcing us out. He's like, okay, like one thing a week feels reasonable to plan. And he's definitely an introvert. And so we've had to find a balance of requiring them to engage, because otherwise, like I said, they'll stay in their room, or versus like it's super expensive to go do stuff. So I'm like, okay, let's go bowling. And then $150 later, we're like, wow, that was really expensive to just like go bowling for a couple hours. And so trying to find a balance of keeping them engaged has ended up with us just gamifying almost everything. Like we are finding a way to make everything fun.
Okay. Yeah. I'm like, oh man, I would be exhausted too. Like I would be the 15-year-old. Like
Yeah, I know, I
I,
get it.
yeah. Well, and I'm like thinking about was like somebody listening to this and being like, oh my gosh, I can't even imagine. And I also get it though, but like if things are like if they're not there that often, and then like your husband's about to deploy, because like I said, my
Mhm.
husband's in the military too. We talked about that before. But like, what if he doesn't come back, right? Like worst case scenario, what if he doesn't come back? Okay, this is the last time that like morbidly, like maybe he's gonna be here. So
Uh-huh.
let's make sure that we like do everything. Like let's end on a good note, right?
Yep.
And then that way you guys have those memories. And then like they go back home and you're like, I need a week to like recover.
Yeah. And I think, right. And so, like, if that's not their thing anyway, and then I'm
Right.
forcing them to do the thing, and then I'm like, this is fun, right? Then they're like, wow, I doubly don't like this thing. And so I get it. And last year, we usually try to do, when they come for the summer, we try to do like a week at least of some sort of vacation, something. And we did a couple years in a row where we just got the like, well, where are we going? Well, how long are we going to be there? Well, what are we doing when we're there? Like that sort of interrogation where they clearly didn't think this was a fun idea. And so last year we were like, okay, no more summer vacation thing. Like, we'll just let it ride. We'll see how it goes. Like, we'll do our vacation thing outside of that schedule so that we still feel like we're doing something or active, but we're not forcing them to participate in a thing that they're just sort of like, meh. And then
Yeah.
again, it's super expensive. Like last year we went to Vegas and it was very expensive, and they were like, cool, don't
Yeah.
care.
And I feel like,
Cool.
especially like as teenagers though, like if that's all you're doing, like to kind of go back to what you were talking about earlier, like you're just gonna buy their attention, or you're going to force them into this, and not so much like
Hmm.
buy their love, but like it's something that we can do, like look at all the things that we can do. They're like great, like it's like you said, like they're going to double down, like I definitely don't want to do it. But if
Hmm.
they're already not at your house and they don't have friends there, maybe they have like a few friends like in your neighborhood, or like that they could maybe go and hang out with. Probably not, because they're never there. But then how cool is it to go away with your dad and like stepmom to like
Uh-huh.
do something, right? Like, oh, you maybe meet kids on vacation, and like, who are you here with? And we're like, my parents, and they suck. But
Yeah.
like my parents are actually divorced, so I'm actually here with my dad and my stepmom, and like, yeah, it's whatever, right? Because
Yeah.
you say stepmom and people are like, I don't know, you're a stepmom.
Uh-huh.
And
Yeah.
same thing like with the stepkids. Okay, so it which made me think that a few weeks ago I was thinking about like content things and like different things that have been called throughout like our relationship. Like I was like dad's girlfriend, like dad's
Yeah.
fiance, like dad's wife. That's my stepmom. And like sometimes there were times that I was just like, I would love to go back to be just being like, that's my dad's girlfriend, or like that's my dad's wife. Like I
Hmm.
would like the onus to like not be on me anymore, to like be this good stepmom and like be engaged. Like I mean, same thing with my stepkids. Like sometimes they were like my stepkids, sometimes they were like those are my husband's kids. Like, depending on the
Uh-huh.
day, like,
Yeah. Or who you were
who am
talking
I, like
to. Yeah.
which like who's showing up? Okay, so humor. How do you use humor to like get through like step family situations?
Yeah, I am hard pressed to not make jokes in any situation. And I find myself inappropriately doing it at work and even in conversations that I have with my husband, I'm like, "Oh, I'll slip into that's what she said joke like in a
Yeah,
difficult conversation because I'm like, at the end of the day, like it's the whole what is it, 5 minutes, 5 years
yeah.
rule where it's like this thing that we think is that big of a deal. Like it's not going to be that big of a deal in a couple weeks. Um, and so what I do with my own kids specifically is we're sort of like trying to learn how to poke fun at everything, like especially ourselves, especially when we fail, we do something dumb, make a mistake where you're like embarrassed about it because previously he would embarrassed cry
Mhm.
and sort of like shut down and go into that like, oh my god, I can never leave the house again. And now he goes into embarrassed, I'm such an idiot, and then he just laughs and like then we both laugh and then now we just laugh at each other doing dumb stuff. And so even with my husband's kids, when it's difficult, I am typically giving him some sort of guidance about like, you could bring up this, you could talk about this, or whatever the case may be. But if it's really charged, like we are at the dinner table and there is something happening, I will usually insert uncomfortable humor so that at least people are like, you're dumb. And I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Okay, the dinner table, like always, like why? Like why is that always so awkward and uncomfortable? I don't
Yeah.
know how many years I spent sitting at because we are the family that like always does dinner together.
Same.
And I didn't grow up like that. So I was like, well, this shit sucks. Like, no one's
Uh-huh.
gonna be here. I hate
Same.
it. I'm sitting
Yeah.
on the ex-wife spot. Like that was the whole thing. I was like, we have to rotate this configuration. Like, I'm not doing this. We need to switch seats. So that was the thing. And then I'm like, I'm just like you and I aren't talking. These two are talking the entire time. No one's talking to me. Why am I
Uh-huh.
here? Why are we
Yeah.
doing this? This sucks.
Yeah, I have definitely learned the like, well, just get someone talking. It doesn't like just get an ally that's willing to talk about their day for the most part. Um, like Christian, who's the 20-year-old, is a very chatty dude. And so if things are uncomfortable, odds are it's not him. He's not participating in the drama. He's past the hormonal change age.
Yeah.
And so when things are weird and you're just like, oh, Chris, did you watch Doctor Who? Then he'll just start talking. And then you're like, okay, great. This broke the ice because all of the kids love Christian. And he sort of has become this like beacon of like, well, we can go to Chris for everything and Chris can come to us for everything. Like he's never really a party in any of the fights that are happening.
Mhm.
And finding one person who's willing to talk, I'm like, okay, that's all we need. And then suddenly everybody's much more comfortable and they're like, oh, well, I have an opinion on that thing because they all have an opinion about everything all the time. And I'm like, cool, okay, good. Then you guys get it rolling and I'm going to be over here eating my chicken.
Okay, so maybe it would be beneficial to have like more stepkids because I only had two. And like my
Oh
daughter
yeah,
was
that's
extra at the time. And I'm
that's
like,
hard.
one of them is talking. I feel uncomfortable. The other one feels uncomfortable. And there's my husband who's also like your husband. It must be like a military thing. Like pretty like quiet, kind of an introvert, which is
Mm-hmm.
like funny, like based on like what he did. Um, but I'm like, so one person's dominating the conversation. This is great.
Mm-hmm.
But like
Yeah, that
not in a good way though. Like not like dominating in a good way.
right.
Like dominating, like monopolizing the conversation. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I would rather like stick this fork in my eye.
Yeah, I can imagine because there's definitely in those instances where not all of the kids are present together, the dynamic is definitely different. Like there's more of a things just feel heavier sometimes depending on who's sitting at the table, which is such it's really unfortunate because that's not a thing you can communicate to kids. Like, hey, you're a drag. And if you could lighten up a bit, you just can't say
Imagine if
it.
we
And
could
so
though, right? Like,
I know every day I'm like, gosh, I wish I could say this.
yeah.
But you just gotta let them work through it. And so sometimes when you're sitting at the table and you're like, these are the ones that are happening today. Okay, great. We're gonna make the best of this. But
Yay, this is
um,
fun.
yeah, I think also my husband does a good job of like just asking people questions. That's his contribution to the conversation a lot of the times is getting people to answer questions about themselves. And so he does a good job with his kids of like, well, tell me about a thing that happened today. Well, what boy are you talking to? Like, who are you texting? What are your friends doing right now? And so it helps get things rolling because it does not happen organically. They all just like sit and stare at the walls if we let them.
Yeah. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh. Yeah. And there's nothing on the walls for them to even be staring
Nope.
at.
Yep.
Yeah. I'll
Mhm.
notice it. Yeah. And that's funny because we had a situation like that too. And the like, hey, how's your day? Like, what's going on? What up? That's interrogation. That's interrogation. You guys are nitpicking.
Oh,
And I'm
right.
like, I guess we're gonna sit here in silence. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, the dinner table is really hard because it's a forced thing together. Like, yeah, it's great because you're all together, but it also sucks because you're all together and there's like
Mhm.
no leaving, right? But then it did get easier over the years. Like once I got to be like Christina here and like not care, I was like, I don't, if you like me, great. If you don't like me, that's okay too.
Mhm.
That's not how I started. I was very much like in my head about like, what if I see something stupid or like what things are going to get repeated back
Yeah.
or what, whatever. Yeah, just like all of the things, right? And like I was telling you, like I'm 16 years younger. So I'm like halfway between like my stepdaughter and my husband. And so then I'm like in this weird dynamic of like, I can relate to him and like that's more of like my circle, but also I know exactly what you're talking about. And I know what all of these things like that you are talking about mean, where he's
Mhm.
like head in the clouds, I have no idea. And I'm like, never mind. I feel like I'm like the bridge, like I'm bridging the gap here. And it's like,
Yeah.
okay, this is it's exhausting.
Yeah, I think that has been and do you want me to close my window because I noticed the sun is
Okay.
coming in and I look like a weirdo. Okay. I noticed that there is a bonding thing that started happening when I started navigating my social media. So for a long time, everything I had was private. I didn't care. I rarely posted. And then I was on a previous podcast where we were just trying to grow super fast. And so I opened a bunch of public social medias and started putting a lot of effort into that. And so just the byproduct of that is that now you're in on the inside jokes and the stupid like skibbity toilet and like all of those things that you're like, well, I learned this stuff against my will, but it's really helpful
Right.
in these conversations where I'm hearing them talk about stuff and I'm like, oh, I know what you're talking about. Even from a like when they're trying to get something past you and you're like, I already
Yeah.
know what you're talking about. Nice try, but okay. But
Yeah.
also they're like, oh, you know what that mean? Like it's helped my style in a way that I'm like, oh, okay, well, I'm dressing more in accordance with like what's trendy right now versus previously. I was like, whatever athleisure I can find. And so the connection to social media, I feel like has helped me sort of integrate with them on a different level that I wasn't expecting. And even my kid the other day was like, I Googled you and you have a lot of stuff out there and you have a lot of followers. Are you famous? And I was like, you've seen me in my pajamas every single day of your life. Like, you know, I'm not famous. I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, you have a podcast. I think that makes you famous.
I know they just don't know the distinction. And so they're
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, you have 1,000 followers. You must be famous.
I
I'm
know,
like, yeah,
right?
sure. Whatever makes me cool.
Yeah, that makes me famous. When is that going to start paying my bills?
I know I'm waiting for that as well. I'm on. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely agree though with like the social media stuff where my husband doesn't do social media at all.
Yeah.
And so same thing, like I'm up on like different things and he's like, how do you know that?
Yep.
And I'm like,
I'm like, how do
again,
you
it's
not know that?
I know, right? Yeah. I'm like, and then I'm like, oh yeah, you're not even on social media. So of course you don't know that. And
Yeah.
so there are things that like I see or you know, consume like throughout the day, which I know that like my stepson will, appreciate or my stepdaughter will appreciate.
Uh-huh.
So I'll send it to them or, vice versa. Like whenever my stepson is like, whenever we're with him, like his downtime is like scrolling TikTok. And so I will sit there and we will laugh our asses off about whatever stupid stuff that he sees on TikTok where my husband's
Yep.
like, that's dumb. And I'm like,
Yep.
it might be dumb. Like we're bonding here, okay? Like
Uh-huh.
Stop
That's
it. Yeah.
exactly how I feel with my stepson, where it's like we based on our work schedules and whatever the case may be, we might not see each other for 2 days.
Yeah.
And then his inbox will be full or my inbox will be full of different reels that were like, you'll just like, oh, did you see this one? Oh yeah, I did. Okay, did you see this one? Like, we're
Yeah.
really excited to share our dumb jokes. And my husband could not care less. He's like, that's
Yeah.
dumb. It's not funny. I'm like, yes, it is.
It is hilarious. Yeah. Or like we'll have like this is so funny. My stepson and I would have like crazy questions. Like I said, he's also in the military. So one time we were having like this morbid conversation about like what if he dies? Like what are we gonna do or
Okay.
say at like his funeral? And he was like, you better
Oh
tell
my
them all the
God.
crazy stories.
Yes.
Like we were like laughing, right? And my husband
Yep.
comes and he's like, what are you guys talking about? And so we're like, oh, like if something happens to him, he's like killed in action. And he was like, what is wrong with you guys?
Yep.
Like we literally would talk about anything and we're big into like space at our house and like aviation and like all of the things like and so there are times that we will just like daydream talk about like whatever like what
Mhm.
if you could insert whatever crazy thing like what if you actually got abducted by aliens, right? And so we'll like talk
Right.
about it or my husband comes in with the logic and he's like no, based on the laws of physics and we're like
Oh.
never mind, like let's go ahead and close the door.
You're making this unfun.
Yeah, right. I'm like, sometimes you just have to put that playful hat on. Like my
Yeah.
daughter, like I said, she's 5, and it is really fun to like, sometimes it is really fun to navigate her world and just be like, anything is possible. And it's
Uh,
so creative and it's so amazing. And then there are other times where I'm like, I would really like to talk to an adult right now.
yeah, that's the amount of Pokemon stuff I've learned against my will because my kid just is like, oh, this and this and this and this. I'm like, you know what you need is a friend who also likes all of these things. And thankfully, my stepdaughter is that friend. And so they just like, this is all they do all day long. And I'm like, okay, great. Because if I have to hear one more thing about Pikachu or whoever, I'm about to lose my mind.
I heard it like spontaneously combust.
Uh huh.
Do they keep in contact like when they're not together?
They're atrocious at staying in contact. I don't know what their deal is, but I'll be like, oh, Xavier, have you talked to Ava? And he'll be like, oh,
Who?
well, I texted her for her birthday, which was like 6 months prior. And I'm like, you guys don't talk to each other. Like, you can't just send a text and be like, hey, what's up? But they're atrocious at that sort of interaction. They just do a terrible job. And then they'll come back together and it's like they never spent any time apart and they're back to being best friends and they're chit chatting and they're catching up and they're doing whatever. And I'm like, well, I'm glad that it's such an easy integration, but why it is so painful for them to stay in contact, I don't know. But even my kid is like, he's been at school for a couple of weeks and he's like, I miss my friends. I'm like, call him. He's like, oh,
No one calls.
yeah. I'm like, okay, well, text him. Oh, I'm like,
It
well,
requires
you can't
effort,
miss them that bad because you don't even want to contact them.
right? Yeah. Is there like a transitioning period, like when they come back? Like, is it awkward? Like, that's a struggle that I see a lot with stepmoms. Like, oh, there's always this transition period of like, they have to unlearn whatever they learn there, or like they have to like shift into like our dynamic. Do you guys have that?
Not as much anymore. I feel like there was a period of time where it was 1 week on, 1 week off when they lived in the same area. And that was always a struggle because of their ages
Mhm.
and because everything was just constantly in flux. And so it was little things like it was like uh take off your shoes when you get home and then where to put those shoes and then don't just throw your backpack on the floor. But it was like 1,000 of those things. And so now I feel like because the integration is more like, hey, we're going to pick you up from the airport. We're probably going to get lunch out. We're going to like have some time to have fun and acclimate so that by the time we get home, you can go in your room, you can like take a breather, check in with your mom, make sure everything's good. Like
Got it.
it's
Yeah.
just more of a system where it's like fun and exciting. And then we're like, okay, go ahead and decompress. And then we'll have dinner later where we're actually talk. And so it doesn't feel as chaotic as it used to because the system is sort of built now.
Yeah, I like that though. I'm like, oh, you know what? Maybe my stepkid should have moved out of state. No, I'm just kidding. But like, yeah, that makes sense though, because you do have a system. Like you get in, we know we're going out for lunch. We know that like we have that forced interaction. I mean, because that's
Mhm.
literally what it is, like right or wrong, better or worse. But like we have to engage. And then we're going like, okay, all I have to do is make it through lunch and then make it through like the car ride home. And then I'm
Mhm.
gonna be able to like be a recluse for a minute. And then I'll come back out for like forced interaction for dinner.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's been really helpful for them because they also like best case scenario, they're traveling for 5 hours. Worst case scenario, it's been like a 12-hour day for them. And so I'm like, I don't expect anything of you. You roll in your pajamas and you're not chit chatty and you just want to put your headphones in. I'm cool with that too. Like, we're
Mhm.
going to have time to sort of like debrief and talk about things later. I'm not super concerned with, oh, well, right here, right now, I need you to tell me that like I'm a good stepmom for picking you up from the airport.
Yeah.
I don't care.
And if you're looking for the validation from your stepkids, you're never going to get it. Ever.
Right. And
Ever.
yeah, like the name of the game here is longevity. Like I'm not trying to be like, "Oh my gosh, they were mean to me today." I'm like, "Well, great. In 10 years I want them to feel comfortable that I can come babysit their kids." That's the game I'm playing here. I'm not playing the like, "Well, they didn't like me and so it hurt my feeling." I don't care. It's cool. You're going to have bad days. I have bad days too. I'm not holding it against you. And uh by all accounts, for most of the year, I'm a stranger to them from a like the dynamic that we have together. And so I afford them whatever they need to feel more comfortable because they come and live in my house essentially for a period of time. And so I'm sure for them too, they're like, okay, well, I got to make sure I do the right thing and I say the right thing. And they're worried about stuff too. And so I'm just giving them the benefit of the doubt that like it's been a rough day for everybody because we also like don't sleep the night before they come because we're getting everything ready and we're a little angsty and we're always wondering what the dynamic's going to be and how things have changed. And so everybody's wrecked. The first day they come, I'm not trying to put any sort of pressure on it.
I love that. I think that transition days are like, they can be hard, but if you have a routine or if you have a system in place, like that really, 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 really helps things. Like we would, whenever when my stepson was going back and forth, whenever we'd come back, like I'd have to drive an hour and 10 minutes one way to get him and like come
Yeah.
back, we would always get Chinese food for dinner and like we would just chill out. And it's just like, that's just what we did. It was super low key. Like, we're not going to do anything crazy. We would just stop and pick it up on the way back. And it makes it that much easier because then you already know, like, okay, when I get picked up, this is what's going to happen. This is what's going to be expected of me. This is when my break is going to be. And it's like you're
Mhm.
like hanging on for that part of it.
Yeah, and that's why we have worked, my husband has really worked to preserve their bedrooms.
Mhm.
So they're not here for the majority of the year. So we have bedrooms that just are going unused, but he's very adamant to be like, no, they need their own spaces so that we're not going to be like, well, you're not here most of the year. No worries. We'll just combine your guys' rooms together when you come back because you're not here for very long. It's like, no, they need their own. They need to know that when they're what they're coming back to is theirs and that this space within the house is safe for them and it's something they're familiar with. And that they've been able to make their own. Like they got to decide how it was going to be painted, they got to decide how it was going to be decorated. And so we want to make sure that they still see this house as a place that they're comfortable, even though they're not coming here often enough for them to be comfortable by routine.
Mhm. It's weird. It sounds like you actually have like the best interest of the kids at heart.
I know it is unusual in some of these dynamics. That's why I always think all this like wicked stepmom rhetoric and all that stuff. I'm like, if you only knew the amount of work that you have to put in,
Oh my
that is thankless. Like the mindset doesn't even make sense to me. Like, oh, wicked stepmothers coming in to compete with the daughter. Like I could not care less about anything other than like, are we all cool? Is everybody cool? Because also in this dynamic, my kid has to exist. So I'm not trying to create anything toxic or anything, any sort of bad environment where my kid is now feeling the repercussions of them feeling uncomfortable or them bickering with you. I'm like, no, I want everybody to be cool. So whatever that looks like, however we can do that to get to a respectful place where everybody's just cool, great. That's the goal. And then if you have a good time in the process, great. If you don't, I don't think at their age they have a lot of perspective to understand, hey, we get to go to Disneyland. I never went to Disneyland when I was a kid. I grew up very, very poor. And so they don't even know how cool things are and they won't get perspective for a long time. And then they'll probably be like, whoa, I had a really cool childhood I didn't even know about. Or my dad was super supportive and I didn't even realize it at the time. And that's okay. Like we're just banking it for later and that's okay.
Yeah, kids always grow up and look back with an adult perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, oh, because same thing, I grew up with no money either, like super poor. And there are times that I look back and like, oh, you know what, this could have been better, that could have been better. But all of the players in this game of life, in my game of life, did the best they could, right? And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, it's you have to play the long game. So I love how you're like, we're just banking on it. Like this is
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's been such a good conversation to have with you of like, it's okay if my stepkids don't like me. And it's like, I'm playing the long game here. Like, if you're listening to this and like, those are two things that I want you to take out of this conversation. Like, it's okay if they don't like me. Like, they didn't ask for this. They're struggling in their own way, right? Because no one wants their parents to be divorced.
Right.
At the end of the day, they probably still want their parents to be together. And that's a legit like feeling. Like, that's totally valid, right?
Hmm.
But then also like, they might not like you, and that's okay. Doesn't say anything about you. Like, you and I could switch positions and
Exactly. And they
there
would
would
feel
be something
exactly the
underneath.
same way. Yep.
Yeah.
I don't take it personally. I'm like, oh, I am a dime a dozen when it comes to people that could be in your life. I do not take your feelings against me personally. It's okay.
That's a really good mantra to like have. Like, I'm a
Yeah.
dime a dozen, like of people that could be in your life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for talking to me about stepmom stuff. Where can everyone find you?
Yeah. So if you're interested in fun, funny stuff, which I know is a little bit different than the normal content, my website is wisecrackingblonde.com. And I also am coming out. So my current podcast is a trivia podcast. It is adults and it can be explicit. There's some cussing that happens. I'm coming out with a kids podcast that's just called Kids Trivia Podcast. And I am looking for submissions for kids who want to be on the show. So if you visit my website, which is wisecrackingblonde.com, there's a page that says apply to be a contestant. And if you have a kid, I'm looking for ages 5 to 12, that would be a good time to have on the show. I don't expect anybody to be like, look at me, but they can't be super shy. Like obviously it's a podcast. So if you have a kid that would want to be on a trivia podcast, either to get asked questions or the alternative is that they're just going to ask the questions and then I'm going to record it as though they're asking to the audience. Then go ahead and submit it online. And then I'm setting up a recording schedule and it will be an audio only recording because I don't collect any kids' images and I won't put out any pictures of them. But
Oh,
if you
I
have a
love
kiddo that's interested in that, head over to my website.
Ah, perfect. Thank you
Yeah.
so much. I will link everything in the show notes. But this has been such a good conversation. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks for taking time to listen to this week's episode. If anything was helpful or resonated with you, please share it on social media and tag me. I'm just at Alicia Crosco. And if you could leave a 5-star rating and review while you're at it, that would also be really helpful. And if you find yourself struggling with your stepmom journey and you want a little bit more support without the hefty price tag of coaching, you might want to check out the Stepmom Side community, which is my own private community for stepmoms, where you get to connect with other stepmoms around the world and myself, where I hold weekly office hours and monthly group coaching. It's kind of like you have your own personal coach in your own back pocket. Again, without that hefty price tag. See you next week.